Hi, everyone. I can see that we're starting to get a few more folks in. So I'm just going to get started. I hope you enjoyed the springtime jazz to kind of get you in the mood and ready for a real education that we have in store for you today. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the HESI Dart Spring Career Symposium. As you may have read from the information on the flyer, this is an event that will last from 1 p.m. today until about 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I'd like to give you a brief introduction to HESI, the Health and Environmental Sciences Institute. We are a global nonprofit institution whose mission is to collaboratively identify and help resolve global health and environmental challenges through the engagements of scientists from academia, government, industry, and NGOs and other strategic partners, with the the overarching mission to develop science for a safer and more sustainable world. And in doing so, what we recognize in order to make sure that it is sustainable is that we are training the next generation of capable and talented scientists to ensure that this mission comes to fruition. And the DART program has recognized this in the development of the HESI DART training program, whose goals is to increase awareness of DART career paths and training for the next generation of scientists by providing awards to help postdoc or early career scientists to gain experiences in the career fields, but also build collaboration networks to raise visibility of the young talent that's out there and to increase diversity, inclusion, and representation in the DART field at large and within the HESI DART committee. And with the hopes of also increasing academic sector participation within the HESI DART committee. We hope to achieve this by developing and launching a variety of different program components, which you see here on the left. One is the Professional Development Awards, which I'll tell you a little bit more about following this session. Webinars like this Career Spring webinar and perhaps even scientific webinars competitive awards catered to postdoctoral sciences, in which they can share some of the emerging science in the field. Stipend awards, in which students can actively work on ongoing and current DART projects to help move them and advance them towards completion. And we're also toying around with the idea of doing a co-sponsored long-term experiential training opportunity in which we'll have a cohort of students who will have some kind of externship within one of the participating DART organizations where they can get hands-on experience to help set them on their path to a career within DART. So here, today's program, the agenda is as follows. I'll spend a few minutes giving you a brief opening remarks and a welcome. This will be followed by an outstanding keynote address by Dr. Elise Lewis. And from 1:45 to 2:45, we'll move on to our career panel, which will be followed by our speed darting, in which you'll have the opportunity to network with a number of our DART experts or experts within the DART community to ask questions or to have them share their experiences in their current career field. So without further ado, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Elise Madison Lewis, who currently serves as the Principal Director of Toxicology at Charles River Laboratories in Horsham, Pennsylvania. Dr. Lewis is a native of Alabama, and she received her bachelor and doctorate degrees from the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. In 2001, she joined Charles River Laboratory as a study director in the area of reproductive, developmental, and juvenile toxicology. She now serves as the principal director of toxicology at the Horsham site, with additional oversight of reproductive, developmental, and juvenile toxicology specialty service within the East Coast region of safety assessment. She she may look very familiar because she is the past president of the Society of Birth Defects Research, or BDRP, current past president of the Philadelphia chapter of AWIS, or Association for Women in Science, and she has great interest in investing in the next generation of students who are eagerly pursuing education in the areas of STEM. So without further ado, I am happy to pass the podium over to our very decorated keynote speaker, Dr. Elise Lewis.
Well, thank you, Charmaine, and thank you to the organizing committee within HESI for the opportunity to share this platform with you today to actually be your keynote speaker. I remember during the planning sessions, I was, sitting and listening to, who's going to volunteer to do this, and I'm like, don't pick me, don't pick me, don't pick me. But I'm very happy to be here because everyone has a story to tell. And everyone deserves the opportunity to expose others to avenues in which they can continue to grow along their career paths. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this will work. Charmaine, can you see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Perfect. All righty then. So here you can tell from my title, I'm just going to give you kind of a personalized journey from, academia all the way through my current career in drug development. And I've, had an opportunity to work in this field for over 22 years. Some of the individuals who are on this phone, I've worked with either professionally or from a scientific perspective in different organizing societies. And I'm just happy to be here today. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time, kind of talking about my background interests, how I got into, STEM to begin with, my transition into toxicology, because I knew nothing about toxicology, and then eventually developmental toxicology, and then my career in contract research. So when I hear the terms industry, most people think about pharmaceutical companies, but I'm actually in industry with regards to contract research. And then, just to kind of end the presentation and talk a little bit more about those who believed in me, those who were mentors, those who were sponsors to me, and just my own personal stewardship in this area, because it's very important to me to leave a legacy while at the same time leading and learning along the way. So you'll see little funny quips about this. So I had a plan, then there's the detour, there was the delay, and then there's the backup plan. So every time I talk to graduate students, I try to impress upon them that always have a backup plan, because you never know what's actually going to happen that will cause you to transition from one thing to the next. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you actually have to start over. So back when I was growing up as a child in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, I gravitated towards the science and mathematics area, a very strong interest in those spaces. And I'd made kind of my career choice, when I was in the 8th grade. We're always asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? So what I wanted to be was an obstetrician. So while other people were in, my classmates saying they wanted to be lawyers, other, medical professionals or athletes or possibly even teachers, I chose something that, not many people really would go down that avenue at that age to say, I'm going to be an obstetrician and gynecologist. So from that point on, I just kind of patterned myself and stayed focused. And for those who know me, like when I get my mind made up, that's what I'm actually going to try to do. And I didn't receive a lot of guidance or career information from an academic counselor or my academic counselors in high school. So when I graduated, I continued on my plan to major in biology to support my pre-medical academic track, minor in chemistry, take the MCAT, graduate, move away from home to go to medical school, and then concentrate on my specialty, no matter how long it would take. So during college, I had the great fortune to be advised by the dean of the biology department, Dr. William Darden at the time, and he worked diligently every semester from my entry into his department to persuade me to pursue, an opportunity in graduate school rather than medical school. And I believed in my path so much that each semester he would ask me, have you considered, graduate school? Do you know that we offer this and that? And I was like, I'm going to medical school. So as I was approaching my last semester in college, I realized that I didn't like hospitals. And so my plans for medical school had to be quickly dismissed. And I quickly regrouped and thought about some of my options. The revised plan was to continue with my studies and complete my major in biology. And in an effort to graduate early, because I was going to get out of college, in 3.5 years instead of 4, I decided to combine all of my elective coursework into a cognitive minor. And then upon graduation, I said to myself, well, if I'm not going to go to medical school, then I can pursue a 5th-year master's degree in education and teach. And I half-heartedly pursued, some thoughts about, well, maybe I could go into physical or occupational therapy. And this was just a detour that I did not consider, to be a major detour, but it was just a minor setback. And one of the reasons why I changed my mind about going into medical school were there were personal, issues related to some medical consequences with my mom. And sometimes those types of issues will help, guide us along the way. So from that point forward, I had to come up with another plan. So I was in my last semester of college and undergraduate. I enrolled in a general toxicology class. I'd never heard of toxicology before. And this single class itself and one book on congenital anomalies changed my outlook on my future. I actually had to go and do a research paper up at the medical school library in Birmingham. And when I walked into the library, on the table, there was a book that was open. And by fortune, I just so happened to walk over there. And I saw, all of the genetic and or congenital anomalies that were, present at the time and or identified at the time. And I said, this is something that I would be greatly interested in understanding more of. So after a quick chat with my academic advisor, I applied to take the GRE. I actually passed and then applied for graduate school. And then due to last minute, changes in my pursuit of higher education, I was accepted into the master's program at the University of Alabama with the understanding that I'd be accepted into their PhD program in the fall of that year, and then be supported by a minority fellowship. So when it comes down to the fellowship, well, they, quickly worked to get me on what was called the Future Faculty Fellowship Program. And this was designed to encourage students to pursue, doctoral degrees or become college professors. So as you can see, I'm not a college professor at this date, but I utilized this opportunity, again, to gain more skills, gain skills in the area of teaching. I come from a long line of teachers. My mother was a teacher for 42 years, and this is something that I actually learned over time from her, how to educate others. They paid my tuitions and my fees, so I went to graduate school free. So that was great for, me and my mom at the time. The Future Faculty Fellows were among some of the most prestigious and competitive graduate fellows at the university, and they were only awarded to graduate students with high academic and scholarly qualifications at that time. And you had to be nominated by your major department and selected by the University of Alabama Graduate School. So as a part of that fellowship, not only did I have to do my research and pretty much show up every day, I actually had the opportunity to teach various labs and courses and to be trained to be a graduate teaching fellow. So I instructed labs on anatomy and physiology, vertebrate histology, did the majors and the non-majors biology courses, the introductory to biology 101. Those are very interesting courses. And then, had the opportunity to serve as teaching assistants in the area of cell biology, genetics, and human physiology. And then took a semester off during the summer to actually go and teach on my own through Johns Hopkins Institute of Academic Advancement for Youth and become one of their medical science instructors for about an 8-week period. So within the graduate program, of course, you always have to identify, well, how are you going to get to your endpoint? What is going to be your path? So what was required of me as a graduate student? So there was the coursework that you actually had to take. You had to have independent original investigations, comprehensive examination at the end of, all of the work that you'd have actually done, the dissertation to clearly and effectively present the results of, some substantial research, and then distinctive achievements in a special field. So I had my fellowship, I had my curriculum laid out for me, and I had my major, which was in the area of toxicology. Well, what I had as a plan for research was, something that probably would have seemed fairly simple by today's standards, but back in the day, we did a lot of in vivo work, didn't have a lot of the molecular advances or technology that was available. So I was actually kind of straddling the fence between doing in vivo work and doing traditional teratology assays at the time, as we would call them. And the premise was to take cyclophosphamide, which is a nitrogen mustard alkylating agent, and then administer it to pregnant mice on a single occasion, and then look at the outcome between the traditional embryo fetal assays and then what was called at the time the COMET assay, looking at DNA strand breaks. Okay, sounds simple enough. Well, at the end of the day, there were challenges that were actually there. So what was missing was the independent original investigation, and delayed in getting the dissertation because the research just wouldn't work. I got all of the in vivo work done. I tried and I tried as I would along the way to try to get the COMET assay up and running. And of course, every time I would read a new piece of literature and it seems like people were publishing in this area, and I just couldn't make it work. So cyclophosphamide plus animals, yes, gives me my traditional endpoints, but I was not able to see the DNA strand breaks. So after 5.5 years, what was accomplished? I was able to, complete all the coursework, which was done in about 3 years. I was able to actually, after 4 rounds of animal-based research, get the assay up and running. And I think it, was when I took the opportunity to go and teach for Johns Hopkins for the 8 weeks, stepping away from the research and then coming back with a fresh perspective, saying that it's time for me to get out of school. And I remember the very day that I was sitting in the dark, because I had to work in the dark or under red lighting conditions to be able to see that this assay was working. I saw tears come to my eyes and fog up the microscope because I could see the DNA strand breaks. And I said, I'm actually going to graduate. And I remember going home that day and saying, Mom, we're going to get our PhD. So at that time, I graduated in 2000. I was the second African-American female to graduate with a doctorate degree from the Department of Biology at the University of Alabama. And I took my entire family, my entire contingent. And one of the things that they tell you during the commencement exercises, please hold all of your applause until the end. Well, my family did not, recognize that as an option. So what's my path forward? So from graduate school to where I am today. So you can see the present day, but today I have a strong belief in learning, leading, and leaving a legacy. So early, in my career, I had the opportunity to go back and, present to the biology department at the University of Alabama. I became one of their distinguished alumni at the time. Because of my transition from academia into, early career for drug development. And they were recognizing me concurrently with another professor who had come in at the time to talk a little bit more about how they could use their research with C. elegans and look at drug development from that perspective. So that was a great opportunity for me. And I actually, took every opportunity that I had to go back to my alma mater, and it, again, being able to go back and see my mom and visit my family, but going back to talk to the students and tell them, what else is out there, that, there is something beyond a career in academia. There's more to just going to medical school. There is a whole world of science that are beyond the walls that you could actually see these days. And you may be able to find that by other means, such as in a contract research lab. So from there, I did, from graduate school, I did work for a few months at another contract research lab, but I started my career at Charles River in 2001. And through the opportunities that I've gained here at Charles River, I was rapidly promoted through the scientific ranks, from being a study director to today where I am as a principal director of toxicology, overseeing all of the in vivo science here at my site and collaborating with other scientists across the globe to make sure that not only do we have high standards with regards to the work that we're doing to support biotechnology companies, chemical companies, agrochemical companies, and pharmaceutical companies in their pursuit for drug development, but also to train future leaders, future scientists in everything that is possible. Again, I think exposure is key because, again, I didn't have the guidance that, one would expect in high school. I did not necessarily, understand what graduate school would have done for me and what, besides the career path of going into medical school. But I think, over time, what I feel is a responsibility to all scientists who have made a career in various areas is to go back and educate others, to expose them to every opportunity that is possible for them. And that's what I do to this very day. So I've had some opportunities to participate in, blog posts or chats or, other types of podcasts within our organizations. And one of the most recent, they asked, well, what inspires you to come to work each and every day? And my response was simply, I am naturally energized by the impact that our shared research and scientific advances will have on future generations. And daily, I strive to use our collective research to raise awareness to protect the most vulnerable among us and for future generations from sickness and from disease. And that's just the way that I view my job, that I get up each and every day to make sure that there are no more thalidomides on the market, that we can be the stopgap to getting drugs to the market that may not be safe for women of childbearing condition or even in the pediatric population, and that they could have some adverse outcome on developing offspring. So when I think about what my passion is the research that we contribute to each and every day. But I take that passion back out into the community. So I'm involved in a lot of community service activities. So I'm sure that some of you that know me very well that are on the phone, you're going to start asking, well, how do you find the spare time to do it? And I think what, my short answer would be is that I just make the time. Those things that I am passionate about or that are important to me and that are impactful, those are the things that I lean towards each and every day. So participating in biomedical community or the biomedical research by sharing in career day events such as this. Very happy to be able to share my story with future leaders or future scientists that are interested in STEM, no matter what career stage they're in or what academic pursuit they're actually going after. Yesterday, I actually had the opportunity to present in a career networking event for graduate students and college students at Thomas Jefferson University. So being able to build a network where you get these opportunities, those are the types of things that are important to me. So that one, I can also highlight the importance of, animals in biomedical research, and again, demonstrating what type of careers are actually out there and talking about toxicology, because this is a road that is kind of least traveled. Other, opportunities that I've had, giving back to the community through charity events. Certainly, you want to make sure that you're leaving a mark and you're demonstrating not only that you care about the research that we do, but we care about the community that's around us. And that's one of the things that's near and dear to my heart. How do we get the opportunity to give back to others so that, they can start to pave their own way and or make contributions that are going to be significant to biomedical research. In 2000, or during the time of COVID, I want to say 2001, I was recognized by Fox News for inspiring the next generation of scientists. And this was something that, was very important to me. And it gave me the opportunity not only to leave an opportunity for a legacy, but it gave me the opportunity to share with others that, the type of research that we're doing is very impactful, that developmental and reproductive toxicology needs to be well understood, and we need to be able to use this to ensure that there are no adverse consequences to developing offspring. And I think that that is something that, we should all take the opportunity to do. So that was one of my shining moments to leave a legacy and demonstrate the opportunity to lead in this space. So the Society for Birth Defects Research and Prevention, for those who are not aware, is a multidisciplinary scientific society that was founded in 1960 as the Teratology Society. And society members within this organization, we study the causes and biological processes that lead to abnormal development and birth defects at the fundamental and the clinical level, and appropriate measures for prevention. So throughout, its history, BDRP, as we call it, has had a rich legacy of leadership and multidisciplinary research that has borne much fruit. And I, like several others who are on this call, have grown scientifically and professionally through this scientific organization. So for those who are graduate students that are on the line, here's my sales pitch to you. Being actively involved in a scientific organization gives you an advantage to highlight the latest trends in scientific discoveries, as well as to advocate for resources to support the type of research that is most impactful to us in biomedical research. And there are many ways to get involved, including publishing in cutting edge journals that are supported by the society, volunteering for a committee or working group. And I know that we all have a lot of things to do these days, but sometimes even if you volunteer for an hour a month, that can make a great impact. You also want to take the opportunity to engage and mentor trainees and early career professionals and inspire them to make the difference for future generations. Invite and encourage your colleagues to join and get involved, and then stand united to attract diverse scientific talent and culture, a community, or foster a community that actually engages in active participation and inclusiveness. And those are some of the things that help scientific organizations thrive. So I've been a member of BDRP since 2000 during my graduate years. I've served on a number of committees and or working groups, and have had the opportunity to liaise with other students and graduate students to help them to understand the benefit of the society, while at the same time helping to chair or co-chair sessions, putting forth program ideas so that we can present cutting edge research, and finding the additional time to participate in things like strategic planning, because those actually help to build leadership skills so that you can understand what it means to truly have a vision, to follow the mission, and to grow the future of an organization. And then advocacy is important as well. Scientific organizations were put in place for a reason, not just to share the science, but to advocate for resources that are going to be beneficial to the growth of trainees. So, being elected, a part of, my time with BDRP is that I was elected to serve in the presidential line of this organization. And that was a great honor and a learning experience for me in many ways. I learned the importance of surrounding myself with a good support system. I do that here each and every day at work, but within a scientific organization, it's very important to make sure that your team, your council, your leadership, your board, they actually, are going to be people that are going to put in the extra time to make sure that we are working collaboratively to move the organization forward. Had to learn, I learned how instrumental strategic planning can be to set clear directives to support the mission and the growth of the organization. I learned how to network and collaborate with sister scientific societies and organizations that lead with impact and also drive policy. And most notably, because my presidency came during the time of the global pandemic, I learned how to repeatedly pivot, adapt, and think outside of the box to continue the science and make sure that we could continue to use the platform. So in our history, we ended up actually learning how to move to virtual means to share our science. And that was one thing that I had to do during the time of my presidency. And every president hopes that they did enough to drive the mission forward, plant seedlings and cultivate them properly, use your voice to raise awareness and champion change, and motivate others to get involved. Also, leading by example is something that, was important to me, as well as empowering future scientists. So I'm going to transition a little bit to the Association for Women in Science. So this organization was founded in 1971, and AWIS is a leading organization that's dedicated to driving excellence in STEM by achieving equality or equity and full participation of women in all disciplines across their employment sectors. I joined AWIS Philadelphia in 2017 and have been an active member ever since. And I joined because of my interest in mentoring. And when it comes to education and career and professional development, women at all stages of their lives can benefit greatly from an unbiased sounding board and an experienced and trusted advisor. Mentors, from my view, they can help individuals navigate their academic or career journey by imparting wisdom and, providing advice. And I didn't, again, feel that I had that when I was in high school, nor early in college, but certainly found it when I got into graduate school. Mentoring does provide stability, grounding, and opportunities for professional growth. And one of the strengths of AWIS Philadelphia and AWIS in general is that, we have established mentoring programs. Mentoring circles, if you've never heard of them before, they're the cornerstone of, some of the chapters where they're designed to serve graduate students and postdocs, early career scientists, and scientists who may be new to the regions, who are career changers, or women who are seeking an opportunity to return to the scientific workforce, but is there to be, a safe space for them to talk about some of their challenges and, share with one another so that we can all lean upon each other and continue to grow in our roles wherever we may be. And I continue to serve AWIS by participating in their chapters and advisory committees, like overseeing a couple of different chapters and making sure that they have the resources that they need to empower women in science. I participate by, engaging in their committees that are focused on strategic planning at a national level. And this is something that, is impactful to me, helping women get to their full potential. And this is the change that I want to be a part of as I continue to transition in my career. So some of the, I've highlighted here some of the feature highlights and quotes over the years. I've been featured in some of their magazines, quoted and put on their website. But one of the most notable things that I've actually gained from being a part of AWIS is that as a part of a leadership board, you have to pull your team together and start to focus on what's most important to that particular chapter, again, to sustain the chapter in the future. And during the 2021 term, I was actually serving as vice president and was there in a, co-role of helping with designing a strategic vision based on all of my opportunities that I had with BDRP. And then during my year of president, we actually were just recently recognized about 3 weeks ago for being the best all around, for the mentoring, for using a strategic vision, for growing the organization, for recruiting members and retaining members and making sure that, again, we're empowering women at every level of their career. So this is just some of the stuff that I do in my spare time. Then, I also take the opportunity through some of the platforms, for scientific communities where I have, grown over the years, but reaching back into the community and helping young girls and young women who are in the STEM space become a little bit more visible and to feel that they're being represented. So Girls Up is an organization that I actually got an opportunity to connect with while I was president for the Association for Women in Science in Philadelphia. And this is an organization that is girl-centered leadership development. And it's an initiative that's focusing on equity for girls and women in spaces where they're unheard or underrepresented. This organization was founded in 2010 by the United Nations Foundation as a first-in-kind initiative dedicated to supporting adolescent girls' health, education, and their safety. And I had the opportunity to be a guest on one of their Power Hour sessions that focused on STEM for the social good. And, we had the opportunity, over the course of about 30 minutes to talk about various things. And, two of the notable questions that were asked were, how has being the president of the Philadelphia chapter of AWIS impacted you, professionally and personally? And my answer at the time was, leadership success is about people. And we should not undervalue the importance of being a catalyst or a champion of others for their success. It's not about me as a leader, it's about others. And through AWIS, I have been able to grow and develop as a mentor to young scientists, underrepresented minorities, and other women in STEM. And then one of the other questions during this conversation was, do you have any advice either for girls in STEM or those who want to promote the cause, such as empowering women in the area of STEM? And I don't know how many of you have taken the opportunity to read some of the research that's been published about, underrepresented minorities in STEM, but the research suggests that, underrepresented minorities attribute their absence or their departure from STEM occupations to the lack of access to quality education, lack of role models, uncertainty of success, discrimination in the recruiting practices and or promotions, whether it's conscious or unconscious, and then the lack of engagement to pursue STEM from early ages, which is why I take the opportunity to step back into, the early academic schools, going into elementary schools and talking about STEM and showing them some of the things that science can do for them, and then taking the step into middle school and going into high schools. And when you sit back and think about it, some of the barriers, whether they're real or not, they can be prohibitive to women in science, especially when they do not foster a culture of diversity or inclusion. And it limits one's abilities to step forward, realizing, and they're unable to realize their full potential. And I've met many amazing students and trainees. I wish I could meet all of the ones who joined this call today. And a lot of them, that I've ever had the opportunity to meet or engage with, they have the knowledge, they have the gifts and the talents, and they just need the opportunity to flourish. And they need to be, able to visualize a better future in STEM. So my advice is to guide young women who are interested in STEM through mentorship, through advocacy, and through community service. And being the guiding light and using our voice is very important so that we can share with others rather than just being a mere echo as a part of the scientific community. So when you find your passion, and again, I found my passion in developmental toxicology, and I'm grateful for every opportunity, but your passion for science could be the catalyst that ignites someone else's future in this space. So, not only do I spend my spare time, again, going to educate others, but it's also supporting others through, some of their projects. Had the opportunity, again, as a part of AWIS and as a part of Charles River, to serve as a mentor and a sponsor for a STEM symposium for a Girl Scout Gold Award. And again, this is just another way to give back to the community. So it wasn't all about me. There are, those that I've surrounded myself with over the years, those who believed in me, the role models and the mentors who helped to shape my future and shape who I am to this very day. And, as I have put this in numerous presentations over the years, but ask yourself the question of who believed in you before you believed in yourself. Who paved the way for you? And I've got a number of people, but I could only, highlight a few for this particular presentation. But when someone encourages you to reach beyond your personal goals, it helps to build confidence and momentum. And again, I've already expressed this, but mentors are an invaluable asset who can equip and motivate, inspire, and believe in us so that we can navigate the course to our destiny. Women can benefit from mentors at all stages of their life, and men can do the same as well. They, mentors are instrumental to helping us to move forward. And role models also serve as mentors who guide us professionally. They champion students' work, and they can broaden your professional network. So just a quick sales pitch on mentorship. Well, for those who don't know the full definition, mentorship is a relationship between two people where the individual with more experience, knowledge, and connections can pass along what they've learned to more junior and individuals in a certain field. Mentors, while I've had detours in my life with regards to, my transition from college into graduate school because I didn't go to medical school, those detours that I encountered, while they were momentary for me, they helped me to develop the strength and the character that I needed to be successful in this field. And I also had the opportunity to develop more skills along the way that I did need to navigate successfully through my journey. But success is rarely achieved alone. So, I'm not doing this each and every day by myself. I have a strong band of colleagues and peers who actually support me and those who continue to mentor me, but now I'm in the sponsorship phase of my life. I've certainly, am grateful for those, who are past mentors and those who are present, who guided me, who helped to build my confidence, who opened the doors that I couldn't see, that I didn't have any visual aspects into, and they gave me the momentum necessary to keep driving me forward and not look back about those things in which I wish I could have done. Yes, I wish I could have still gone to medical school, but I think I'd still be doing the same thing that I'm doing to this day, but maybe being able to combine a little bit more of the clinical and the non-clinical work. But I truly enjoy what I do each and every day. So the success of these partners, these mentors, they help me to reach beyond what I could physically see. One of those individuals was my mother. And from conception, my life, has been a unique journey. My mother was 46 when she had me. And she is the major inspiration in my life. She's the one who championed me when, I was talking about I wanted to be an OBGYN, and she'd just sit back and listen with wisdom and, not saying anything, but saying, you need to get education because education is something that no one can take away from you. So I'm not making history, right now by myself solely for me, but I'm doing it for a multitude of underrepresented minorities who need a role model to empower them and encourage them to pursue education and a career in STEM. And throughout my journey, I have been labeled the first and often the only in many facets of my life. But my early academics helped to shape the foundation of where I am. My relationship with my mother and, her being my inspiration helped to move me along the way as I was going from academic advanced placement classes in high school and, being able to graduate from the University of Alabama as one of two, African Americans from that department at the time. And as an aside, I was the second to graduate from that because my name came second in the alphabet. So my best friend was the one who graduated first. And in my family, where education is of utmost importance, I actually am the first to graduate with a doctorate degree and the third grandchild of many. I'm one of 28 first cousins on my mother's side, where I'm the third grandchild to graduate from college. And since then, we've had a number of individuals to go on to pursue master's degree and PhDs. We've got Gates scholars in the family, and this is something that we champion within our family. And some of the words of wisdom that my mother, my late mother has left with me over time is that be humble in whatever you do and let your work speak for itself. And I don't tend to talk about myself a lot. A lot of people say, hey, tell me your story. And I just kind of give them the snapshot. I don't spend a lot of time talking about myself. And when I sit back and I try to put presentations together like this, it amazes even me at how much I've actually accomplished over these short years. Education matters, and you will not be a starving artist, because I thought that at some point during my academic pursuits, I was actually going to major in music because I actually enjoyed playing musical instruments. And she said, you will not be a starving artist. So again, that was one of the areas where I was able to get that foundational learning. One of my dear friends and, essentially mentors during my graduate school years, Dr. Jane Rasco, was a woman who influenced me during that journey. And she always told me, never give up on your dreams. And I have not, and I continue to stay in touch with her throughout the years, and she's still at the University of Alabama and educating young minds. And that, was very important to me, to be able to have someone who would help walk me through my experiments when I was needing, someone to troubleshoot with, and someone to just talk about life in general as, someone who was trying to get a doctorate degree. And then, lastly, but not least, Mildred Christian. She was the founder of Argus Research back in the late 70s. And she took me under her wings when I started with Charles River. And she educated me on those foundational learnings that would help me be a great study director and to also be a great scientist. She also, gifted me the opportunity in her passing to be the co-author on one of the first pediatric non-clinical books that are out there talking about how we develop drugs for the pediatric population. So her words of encouragement for me, when we had the opportunity to work together, is strive for scientific excellence. And that's something that I try to do each and every day. And while mentors are important, you have to be in a space where, you start to transition from mentorship to sponsorship. And those are the individuals who are helping you to advance along your career. And they see the untapped or unappreciated potential, that you may have. And they actually are using their voice to advocate for you, that you're working alongside them as their prodigies. They're helping to make introductions. They're going beyond, some of the traditional things that a mentor would do. And they're actually leveraging their own network to give you the capital that you need to grow in your role and to transition into your next role. So that is something, the space where I am now, those who are advocating and championing for me at this stage in my journey, they're helping to drive the rest of my career vision. So here you can see some of the words of advocacy that Alan Hoberman, who's, known in this field for over 40 years and is a great reproductive and developmental toxicologist. So I volunteered you for, and you just fill in the blanks. And then he follows it up with, I hope you don't mind. So all of those types of volunteer moments or being voluntold to do something, those have actually helped me to grow in my role over the year and to advance to where I am today. Yesterday, during the opportunity at the career networking event, one of the students asked me, well, what's next for you? And I, come to the final slide of my presentation to say, I'm not sure, but I do firmly believe that the best is yet to come. So for all of those who know me or that, I have not met yet, just stay tuned and we'll all kind of see together. So thank you again for this opportunity, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Wow. Thanks so much, Dr. Lewis. I'll first just start by saying that I'm often very starstruck by the number of lead scientists that I interact with in the DART committee. I can remember listening to your interview, your AWIS interview, reading about you on the blogs, and then I saw you at a BDRP meeting, and then I saw that you were president of the organization. And I can't tell you, for me, how empowering it was to see you there. It gave me a sense of confidence and pride, just knowing that you were there, you did it. So thank you for not giving up. Thank you for working hard. Thank you for being nimble and working your way through the ranks so everyone can see your bright and shining light. And thank you for also reaching back and giving back to mentor students who are trying to navigate their way through this path as well. Thank you for sharing your story. It was a remarkable journey. And I'll stop talking now and open the floor up for questions.
Thank you, Charmaine.
I think you all can unmute yourself, but while we're waiting for someone to start with the questioning, I know that one of the things that you kind of emphasized during your talk is the being nimble and agile, but also being open to or finding ways to get yourself exposure. What would you recommend for either those who are currently in graduate programs or even postdoc trainees, ways to get more exposure? I know that you mentioned that being actively involved in professional science and professional societies is one way. Are there any other recommendations that you can give to our trainees?
Well, don't be afraid to try something new. I think that, sometimes we get so focused on what we do and what we do well is that we try to stay along those paths. But have you ever taken the opportunity to think outside of the box and get exposed to something new, because you may be able to marry all of your interests together, once you get that opportunity to see something different. And I think that's one thing that, and most people that know me, that, I could be like the wallflower. I'm not an extroverted individual. I truly am one of those individuals that, when I trust you, we're there together, but, I'm going to walk into a room and I'm going to almost be like the quiet, observant one. But there's nothing wrong with doing something different and taking a challenge and not being afraid to meet a challenge head on. But as you're doing so, learn from it. Learning, leading, and leaving a legacy, those are the things that I believe in today. And I don't think that, learning is going to ever stop for me. And it shouldn't stop for anybody else, especially if you got the opportunity. So I would say, don't be afraid to volunteer for things. Don't be afraid to try. And if, one of our technicians here said that failing is not a bad thing. Failing is our first attempt in learning, because once you know better, you actually do better. And once you can do better, you can continue to grow. So again, just don't be afraid to step out and do something different.
All right, thanks for that, Dr. Lewis. I'm not going to hog all the time, but I'll open the floor to see if we have any questions from our students. And you can just unmute yourself. Don't be shy. Like, this is your opportunity. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there if you have any questions. And I'm guessing that maybe some of you are even wondering why a contract research organization. Like, you had this passion for developmental toxicology and you could have done anything else. What led you there?
Well, I think it was the introduction of, again, people exposing me to it, because right now I think that even in this very day, as instrumental as contract research labs are to the drug development process, we aren't the first thing that people think about. And all of the graduate students that I encounter, they're like, I want to go and work in industry. I want to go work for a pharmaceutical company. And I'm like, that's great. What's going to be your path to getting there? And sometimes, coming through a contract lab gives you the skill sets that you need to advance further in your career. So don't dismiss it as an opportunity. I didn't know anything about them. And I think that there's a number of students that are out there to this very day who still do not know anything about contract research labs. And they, may be a stepping stone for some, but I've learned to make a career out of it for over 20 plus years. And I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but make a career out of it. But this is kind of my home. This is my opportunity to get to see graduate students, to get to see, my colleagues in the industry that are at biotechs or chemical companies and pharmaceutical companies, and we're all growing and working together. It's about having that collaborative spirit, and you have to start somewhere.
Excellent. Just by a show of hands, I'm just interested in knowing how many of our registrants know what a CRO is, or had any idea of what it was before Dr. Lewis introduced us to it. You can use your reaction buttons. This will warm you up to get you engaged. All right, Jennifer, great.
2, 3.
Sarah, fantastic.
That's 4.
4, I know. So, which means that there are a great many who learned something new today, and I think that's fantastic. I guess we have maybe one more minute for one additional question from a student, because I don't want to hog up all the time before we move into our panel discussion.
Well, I guess maybe I can ask a question of the students, and we don't have to come off mic. You can go into the chat and put in your thoughts. But what would help graduate students today and in this age and time with a transition into industry? What is it that you need as more support? What would be beneficial to you? Is it mentorship? Are you finding areas within your schools or within your communities of people to mentor you? Is it exposure, being able to go in and do, tour the facilities? What would actually be beneficial to you to help you transition into industry more effectively?
Great. We would love to hear those, see some of those answers in the chat if you're afraid to speak out loud. But that's a great question, because that's what this trainee program is kind of, that's why we did it, to kind of understand what some of the barriers are so that we can help them get there. We have one.
Heather.
Heather.
Hi, sorry, I have laryngitis, so I'm a little bit croaky. But I think that the biggest barrier, I'm presently finishing a PhD, and I think that the biggest barrier for myself in going towards industry careers is not knowing how my skills from PhD necessarily transfer and not knowing kind of how to phrase or kind of sell the skills that I do have from my PhD in an industry setting, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I heard the same thing last night. So um, when you think about it, when you're developing your CV is an opportunity to sell yourself. It's a moment for you to highlight your skills, to showcase your talents, and to showcase all the things that you've done during your academic pursuits. An organization is key. The CV for an academic, position is not necessarily the same look as the CV for an industry role, and you have to be advised on what's going to capture somebody's eye. When I look at, from a hiring manager perspective, when I think about, the students, what I want to see is, have you worked with, animal models before? And what type of animal models have you done? What have you done in them? How did you advance your research? Have you demonstrated project, or leadership skills in some way? In the role that I started in as a study director, I can tell you that there is no academic institute that's out there that teaches you how to be a study director. That's all on the job learning. And you will be trained, to be able to do the job. But some of the things that help get you there would be to, one, have a strong interest in biomedical research, also demonstrate again that you can work on various projects and that you understand the fundamental science of what we're doing. From there, that's when we take the opportunity to help you grow. We use your strengths, but we also help, strengthen your weaknesses, if that makes sense. And then to help you to learn the job holistically so that you can understand more of the drug development process. Sometimes, it is not about all the publications. That just shows that you've had the opportunity to showcase a lot of your research. But what we need would be, for you to showcase the things that you did in your research. So, don't think about it as, well, I don't know if I can actually get that job again. Try, think outside of the box, connect with someone who can help craft your CV a little bit more for you so that you can start to have those conversations with talent acquisition groups across the industry. And I'd be happy to review your CV if that's something that you actually, need help with.
That's great, because that was just one of the other questions. How do you meet these people that you're interested in pursuing their careers? Like, how would you do that? And so, like, you have a resource in Dr. Lewis, but how would you suggest other trainees put themselves out there to meet the people who are actively doing the work in the field that they want to pursue?
Well, we do have some answers in the chat. Like, it looks like Carrie said, showcase how you can tackle problems and how you can answer questions and ask questions and answer them. And understanding the motivation of why you want the job, that is key. Like, what is your motivation behind trying to pursue this job and pursue this avenue? And then Sarah is actually correct. We have to think that some of the education that is going on in our academic institutes needs to be a little bit more relatable to what industry actually needs. But maybe it's not a, entire semester of how to be a study director, but it's an exposure through a career, a career session during some of the academic sessions to say, hey, this is what a contract research lab is. This is what a biotech would actually be looking for. This is what industry or a chemical company would be looking for. And these are your translatable skills that will help you get those jobs.
Fantastic. I know we're running a little behind on time, but I'd like to again thank Dr. Lewis so much for those nuggets and the wisdom that you shared today. I'm sure that people will be clamoring for contact information to get a hold of you later. And hopefully we will be able to share some of that information with folks who have registered for the session. So if you have any additional questions, you can certainly reach back out and we'll make sure that we'll get those questions to Dr. Lewis and get you an answer. So thank you so much. We are so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Charmaine.
So we will now then move on to the next portion of programming, which will be the panel discussion. And before we jump into that, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Karen Villano, who serves as the Senior Principal Scientist at Boehringer Ingelheim. Dr. Villano received her PhD in toxicology in 2007 from the Joint Graduate Program in Toxicology at Rutgers University. She worked in non-clinical safety at BMS, or Bristol Myers Squibb, in the Developmental and Reproductive Toxicology Group. In the 2000, she joined BI as a senior principal scientist who works on non-clinical safety on cross-functional project teams and serves as a subject matter expert in DART. She has served as chair of the education committee for the Society for Birth Defects Research and Prevention, BDRP, past president of the Middle Atlantic Reproduction and Teratology Association, or MARTA, and is the current president of the Reproductive and Developmental Toxicology Specialty Section of SOT. So without further ado, I will hand the program over to Dr. Villano.
Thanks, Charmaine. For some reason I'm having trouble getting my camera to turn on, but hopefully you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay, I'll work on my camera, but it's not allowing me to turn it on for some reason. So thanks everybody for joining, and it's great to have this group here today, and hopefully our panel discussion goes as well as our keynote speaker did. So I'm going to start by introducing our panelists individually, and then if each of our panelists could answer these questions that Charmaine has kindly put up on the screen so I don't have to memorize them, and our speakers don't have to memorize them. So I'm going to start with Dr. Barbara Hales. So see Barbara's on here. So Dr. Hales received her Master in Science Pharmacognosy from the Philadelphia College of Pharmacy and Science and her PhD in pharmacology from McGill University. She joined the faculty in the Department of Pharmacology and Therapeutics at McGill, where she is currently a James McGill Professor. Her overall research goal was to understand how preconceptional or in utero chemical exposures adversely affect reproduction and development. Her current research encompasses teratogen-induced signaling pathways, consequences of preconception paternal exposure to drugs on germ cell quality and progeny outcome, and the effects of known endocrine disruptors and their replacements on the reproductive system and progeny outcome. Dr. Hales was co-chair of the Chemical Management Plan Science Committee of Canada and a member of the U.S. National Academy's Committee on Endocrine-Related Low-Dose Toxicity. She has served as president of the Society of Toxicology of Canada, and she was a recipient of their Award of Distinction. She also served as president of the Teratology Society, which is now BDRP, and received their Edward Carney Distinguished Service Award, as well as the Agnes Fellowship Award. She's also served as Secretary General of the Executive Committee of the International Union of Toxicologists. So again, to welcome Dr. Hales. And I think if you could go through maybe and answer some of the questions that are here. So the first question is, what inspired you to become a toxicologist, and more specifically, why DART? So we'll start there.
I didn't start off with an inspiration to do this. I started off with the idea that I was going to be a pharmacist. However, in Quebec, pharmacy is only in French, and that was the one subject I did not get A's in high school. So I decided to do 1 year at McGill, and then because you had to do a year, the systems are different, before I went to another province in Canada, and then I got stuck. So I've been at McGill ever since, I think, except for the 2 years in Philadelphia. So I started in cell and developmental biology, and I got my advisor was a marine biologist, so I decided I was really interested in things from the sea, and I worked for a summer at the Fisheries Research Board, and I worked in her lab. And then in Philadelphia, I was really interested in sort of getting closer to what I thought was related to drugs. So I went to learn about pharmacognosy and things that are in sea creatures like sea cucumbers that are bioactive. And then I discovered that was too much chemistry. So I came back to McGill and worked as a research lab assistant for 6 months. And then I decided, this is it. So I asked my supervisor if he'd like to accept me as a graduate student, and he said yes. So I became a graduate student in pharmacology, and then I did a postdoc under the same supervisor, which is not the recommended path. He was a pediatrician, so we were studying drug metabolizing enzymes and development. And then at the end, when I was looking for what to do as an independent researcher, Mark Fraser was across the hallway, basically, in an adjacent building, and Daphne Trassler. And I thought, maybe I'm really interested in something more practical than drug metabolizing enzymes in rats. So I decided to ask him if he'd like to accept somebody as a whatever it is, not even a postdoc, just a part-time person hanging on in his lab. And he said, okay. And so Diana Gerloff taught me basically what I know about teratology. So I would sit beside Diana and do things. And then, even though I didn't really accomplish a huge amount, I managed to write a grant and I got an academic job. And I started then as more of a teratologist. So I think it's an accidental path, is the long answer to the question. But it's basically following one step at a time and where it leads you. So right now I'm a professor at McGill. I've been a professor at McGill for a very long time. And I spent most of my career, other than those 2 years in Philadelphia at McGill. So I know the place fairly well. Most of it's been in the pharmacology department. The answer to the third question is how many years? It's a really long time. So that's always interesting. And I think the advancement and the opportunities are there. So even though I've been in the same organization for so many years, I've gone from, a very naive assistant professor where I had to fight to keep my job because my chair didn't like me. And, you learn to fight for yourself in this process, to now where I'm a James McGill professor. And basically, I have a lot of autonomy. I can basically do many of the things that I want to do. And in general, what I want to do is I love research. I love training graduate students and postdocs. I love teaching in general. So I've always taken opportunities to be involved in teaching. Even when I was an undergraduate, I was a TA in labs. As a graduate student, I taught a CJEP course and volunteered for other things. I gave my first lecture to medical students as a graduate student, which was a very intimidating experience, but it worked out. And I still teach undergraduate students, graduate students, and medical students in many different courses and contexts. So I think the mentorship is very important to me. And I've also done, as you mentioned, a number of service things with other organizations. So those are what I like about being an academic. I really like the interaction with trainees and the opportunity to share and to get them interested in questions that are important, like, for example, reproductive and developmental toxicology or many other topics. So I think that's a quick answer to your questions, but I'm willing to follow up later.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Howell. So I'll go through our next panelists, and then in the end, we'll have some time to ask questions, and then I can follow up with some questions that were asked in previous panels. But also, if you do have questions, you can either put them in the chat or unmute yourself after all of our panelists have introduced themselves. So next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Daniel Mink. He is a non-clinical team leader in the Division of General Endocrinology at the FDA. He earned his PhD in developmental biology from the University of Cincinnati before joining Wyeth Pharmaceuticals in their reproductive toxicology group. Over the past 20 years, his responsibilities have increased. His responsibilities there increased from being a study director for developmental toxicology studies to eventually becoming director of the reproductive and specialty toxicology groups. He was responsible for managing teams conducting these studies across multiple sites. And then following a merger, he decided to pursue a new set of challenges and a new career and join the FDA as a toxicologist, where he was responsible for reviewing non-clinical data in the Division of Metabolism and Endocrinology products. He is now the non-clinical team lead in the Division of General Endocrinology. In addition to performing primary and secondary reviews for non-clinical data that's submitted to the division. He's a member of the CEDAR's Reproductive and Developmental Toxicology Subcommittee. He's an instructor of reproductive toxicity for the Toxicology for Non-Toxicologist Seminar Series, and an FDA scientific advisor for the HESI Reproductive Toxicology Committee here. He was also an FDA representative on the ICH working group that was responsible for the most recent revision of the ICH S5 guidance on the detection of reproductive and developmental toxicity for human pharmaceuticals. So Dr. Mink, we're going to ask you to give us some short answers to these questions that are on the screen as well.
Sure. Thanks, Karen. Assuming everyone can hear me just fine.
Yep.
So the first question was kind of happenstance. I was looking for jobs to help get money for enjoying non-academic pursuits during college, and a job opportunity opened up at the morgue in one of the hospitals. And so I got involved in participating in autopsies. And one of the individuals that we autopsied ended up being a pregnant lady that had a fetus with multiple malformations. And I thought that was kind of gnarly. And I got really interested in what may be causing these malformations in these babies. And through working there at a couple years and talking to the pathologist, I learned of what schools actually teach you developmental biology, and more specifically, what's going on with abnormal development. And that's really what led me to pursue a PhD in developmental biology at the University of Cincinnati. There, I was able to work with some of the founding fathers of the Teratology Society at that time. Jim Wilson still showed up periodically. Harold Coulter was there. William Scott. They're pretty big names back in the society back in a long time ago, let's say. And that's really what got me started in that. So I went to graduate school, pursued a developmental biology degree. After, 5-6 years, I knew that I wanted to go into something other than the academic world. At that time, there was, I guess, a grant funding crisis, and it was very difficult for a lot of the professors to get grants to continue their research. And I wanted nothing to do with that. So that's really what led me to pursue something in the non-academic world. And also at that time, there happened to be a lot of jobs becoming available in industry in the pharmaceutical companies. I chose pharmaceuticals over environment just because I was more interested on the pharmaceutical side, and that probably stemmed back from working with a pathologist in the morgue at the local hospital. And so I got my PhD, then got a position at Wyeth Research as a study director. And as indicated previously, there really is no training for that. I was lucky in that I did have a number of years worth of experience actually handling animals, doing the actual dosing, the skeletal and visceral exams. And so I had quite a bit of hands-on experience to know what study directors are supposed to do, but not actually any experience doing what they do. But anyway, I was able to get a job there as a study director and work my way up through multiple positions within the organization. And as you saw from Elisa's presentation and heard from others, as you get into industry, you get in your positions and you tend to move up relatively quickly as you gain more experience in your chosen field. And so I continued to do that until I was eventually doing more management than actual hands-on science when I became director of the reproductive group, as well as the specialty toxicology group, which was doing the juvenile animal studies at the time, as well as safety pharmacology studies. And then, as you heard from Karen, another company bought us out, and rather than moving to where the other company was, I chose to jump fence and start reviewing the types of documents that I had been preparing. And so I joined the FDA over a decade ago and was primary and secondary reviewer of the entire non-clinical program now for companies, rather than just focusing on the reproductive toxicology side of things. And within the government, I have also moving up over the past number of years, where I'm now doing primarily secondary reviews of the work of younger scientists that are doing the primary reviews of applications to the agency. And I've been there now for about 13 years. And as positions open up, you do have the opportunity to advance as much as you desire. As far as the most satisfying part of my job, I love the variety. I may be working on 20 different drugs within a given week. And so I get a lot of experience with what the issues are across many sorts of drug types or mechanisms of action that happen to be within the division of general endocrinology where I am now. So, one day I may be working on drugs for achondroplasia, where the next day I may be hypertriglyceridemia, and so on. And so it's a continued variety, which really keeps the mind young as you're jumping from program to program as you're reviewing the data. And I love doing that. I think it's great. I've been doing it now again for over a decade, and I see no reason to stop doing that until I finally decide I've had enough science and want to get completely out of it. And as far as I know, that's the most appealing part. And anyone has any questions, feel free to drop me a line.
Thanks, Dan. I'm going to move to, excuse me, our next panelist, Danita Williams. Danita. All right. So Danita currently serves as an associate director in the reproductive toxicology group at GSK, where she's responsible for monitoring outsourced developmental and reproductive toxicology studies, assisting with responses to regulatory authorities, and consulting with internal and external colleagues regarding study design and data interpretation. Her passion for DART was first recognized when she was pursuing her master's and doctoral degrees from the University of Georgia, where her research focused on establishing the guinea pig as an animal model for assessing the effects of Listeria monocytogenes during pregnancy. Upon obtaining her graduate degree, Danita joined the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, where her focus shifted slightly to developing a risk assessment of Listeria in high-risk establishments, such as retail delis, due to the steady number of annual cases at the time. Approximately 2.5 years with the CDC, after 2.5 years with the CDC, Danita joined the US FDA National Center for Toxicological Research for 2.5 years, where she focused on establishing an animal model for drug distribution during pregnancy, which was an initiative that occurred in response to the 2009 H1N1 influenza outbreak. Prior to her current position, Danita also served as study director with LabCorp for approximately 6 years, where she designed, directed, and reported primarily DART and general toxicology studies. So Dr. Williams, if you would give us some of your responses to some of these questions here.
Sure, happy to. Can you hear me okay, Karen?
Yeah.
Yep, good. Okay, so what inspired me to become a toxicologist? Actually, I had no idea of what I wanted to do when I finished school. I knew, I take that back. When I finished, I knew that I loved science when I was in 7th grade. Now, when I saw the movie Outbreak, it came out, I think, in like 1997, 1998. I'm telling my age now. I knew that I wanted to work at the CDC. Now, I didn't know how I was going to marry everything together, but there were a few things that I knew. As far as toxicology was concerned, I had no idea at that point. I had never heard of toxicology in high school or and very little in undergrad. I did take undergraduate school. I did take some classes that discussed toxicology maybe for 30 seconds. So I had just about that much exposure. As far as becoming a toxicologist, it's because honestly I really did not know exactly what I wanted to do, and so I looked for a field that would allow me to branch out in different areas, that would give me the flexibility. And at the University of Georgia, they had an interdisciplinary toxicology program that seemed to work just perfectly for me, for somebody that wanted to explore the different areas of science, but just not quite certain where they'd land. And so that's how I became a toxicologist, to answer that question honestly. And specifically why DART? I happened to, the first lab that I started in as a graduate student, I thought about, I always ask myself the question whether or not I see myself doing something long term. And that was not something that I could see myself doing long term. That research area or focus, just it was, although very lucrative and respectful, is just an area that I couldn't see myself in. So then the second lab I landed in happened to be Dr. Mary Alice Smith's lab, and she was actually on one of the photographs that Dr. Lewis just showed. So I was happy to see that. That was nice to see Dr. Smith. But I landed in her lab, and her lab focused on developmental and reproductive toxicology, and that's so I asked myself in her lab, is that something that I could see myself doing um, throughout my career? And the answer was yes. So that's how DART became my focus. What is your current position? And how did school and or training experiences prepare you for the career? Okay, so my current position is an associate director with GSK. I've been in that position, I'll say, for 1.5 years. August will be about 2 years, will be 2 years for me. So prior to joining that GSK, I was a study director. So I followed a path that Dr. Lewis talked about a lot during her her talk. She mentioned, maybe using a study director as a stepping stool, to get into a different position. And although I didn't expect that to be the case, that is what happened in my particular situation. But just to go back and answer the question, Heather, I think it was you that asked the question about training, making sure that your training is relatable to what industry wants. And that was something that I struggle with, and I still struggle with that, even with when I was going from my current position, is how do I know that what I can offer is what a company really needs. And so what I want to say to you, Heather, is just you'd be surprised. Just put your CV together. For example, and it is going to say a lot more than you'll think. For example, I was published when I came out of graduate school. And when I was going for all these other positions, and that showed, okay, well, she can write a manuscript. She can, the scientific writing is very important. She could evaluate data. So things like that will definitely pop out of your CV. So I just wanted to say that to you. Don't be discouraged, and make sure you definitely just put everything out on that paper, and people will be able to see you and relate you to whatever position that you're going for. Let's see. How many years have you been in that position? I think I've already answered that question. A year and a half, almost 2. What kind of advancement opportunities are available? What I found out with my current position is that it's pretty flat. So I went in as an associate director, and it's pretty flat. But I do have the opportunity within being an associate director to be promoted. And I also have, there are other areas, like if I want to take time off and go into a different department within the company, I can do that. So there are other areas that I can definitely dabble in. But as far as my advancement within my current role, it's kind of flat. But again, there is promotion potential within being an associate director. So what is the most satisfying part about your job? what aspects are most appealing. So for me, it was the most important thing for me was to be able to impact public health. And I think with all of my, not think, I know all of my jobs have allowed me to do so. And with each job I've felt more fulfilled. With this current position being a situation where I feel the most fulfilled. I think it's important to understand your passion. I know we've heard that a number of times. I believe Dr. Hill said it, and I know Dr. Lewis said it, and that was very important. Just knowing your passion, and I'm very passionate about public health, and about positively impacting public health. And my current position as a study monitor with GSK allows me to do just that. Karen, I think I've responded to all the questions. I'm more than willing to answer any additional questions at the correct time.
Thanks, Anita. All right, we just have one more panelist to introduce, and then we can open up to additional questions. So our next panelist is Dr. Xiu Zhao. Dr. Zhao is an assistant professor from the Department of Pharmacology and Toxicology at Rutgers University School of Pharmacy. He received his degree from Beijing University Health Science Center. He obtained his PhD in toxicology from the University of Georgia. Sorry, he received his master's from Beijing University and his PhD in toxicology from the University of Georgia, and completed his postdoctoral training at Northwestern University. Dr. Zhao's research focuses on the female reproductive toxicology, reproductive tissue organoids, female reproductive system on a chip, and novel non-hormonal birth control pill development. Dr. Zhao has published over 60 papers in high-impact peer-reviewed journals and is well-funded by the NIH, NSF, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He has received several awards to recognize his research in female reproductive toxicology, such as the Rutgers Biomedical and Health Sciences Chancellor Basic Sciences Research Award, the Nuclear Scientist Award from the Reproductive and Developmental Toxicology Specialty Section of SOT, and the Joint Biomir Outstanding Young Toxicologist Award of the American Association of Chinese in Toxicology. So thank you, Dr. Zhao, for joining us. And again, if you'd like to address the questions here on the screen and give our audience some understanding of how you came into your career and some of your thoughts about your current position.
Sure. Thank you, Karen, for the nice introduction. And hello, everybody. I'm Shuo from Rutgers University. And for the first question, what inspired me to become a toxicologist? Like Karen said, from my accent, you can tell I'm not from here. Actually, I received my degree from China. After my high school, I went to Peking University Medical School for we call it MD or MBBS. We have different medical school system. And then after my medical school, I decided I want to do the preventive medicine or public health because I exactly experienced we call it SARS. It's similar to the COVID, but not that long. It was only for 6 months. And then the public health or epidemiology was become very popular. So that's why I decided I want to join a public health program. So I went to CDC and do some internship. And when I went to CDC, I did my rotation in different labs. And then I realized I'm not a data guy. I prefer staying in the lab. So I would like to get some evidence to compare the group A and B with less data, but I cannot say more solid, but pretty obvious or significant comparison. It is working or it is not working based on the experimental results. And then I decided probably toxicology or environmental health science is what I want. So from my master degree, I joined a wet lab. So I study how environmental a contaminant, especially the endocrine disrupting chemical, will affect post-menopause women's breast cancer risk. So I did the experiment, I culture cell and do the exposure of some soy products. For Asian people, we eat a lot of tofu, soy milk, and that might be risky for either like a prepubertal boys like a sperm, or for the postmenopause women like increase their breast cancer risk. And then I went to this country. I applied for multiple like a graduate school, and I went to University of Georgia. I realized Dr. Williams is from the we're from the same university. Actually, I know her mentor pretty well. Dr. Mary Alice Smith is a very well-known like a professor. Actually, she was in my committee too. So it's a small world. So I when I was at University of Georgia, I kind of do both biology and toxicology. I studied the molecular mechanism of embryo implantation and uterine receptivity. And then I also study how bisphenol A and other like endocrine disruptor will affect this process. Yeah, so and then so the program I joined is it's called ITP. It's called Interdisciplinary Toxicology Program. So I was kind of exposed to multiple discipline of the toxicology field, not only for the DART, but also for liver toxicology, cancer, and other like a kidney toxicology. So we need to finish a lot of courses about the dose response, pharmacokinetics, toxicokinetics too. And then I realized like a toxicology is really what I want. And then at that time, I was planning to go to industry, so I applied multiple like a position, including PNG and others. I got some offer, but to be honest, like as an international student, green card is a big issue. For example, PNG like offered me the position, but I didn't have green card. And then they told me whether I would like to go to the site in Beijing in China. And I said, probably I was not, at that time, I was not ready going back to China. So so I was also looking for the like a lab in a university. So I joined Northwestern University for my postdoc research. At that time, I studied ovary. So I think that benefited me a lot because for my PhD, I studied the uterus. And then for my postdoc, I studied the ovary, like kind of biology. So I have both the whole female reproductive system. And then at that time, after my postdoc, I still want to go to industry. And then I was interviewed by multiple sites. I did get 2 offers, but from too small, like a startup company, and I didn't go. And I also got 2 like faculty offers from one is the University of South Carolina. So I chose University of South Carolina to start my real career after my postdoc. Yeah, actually, I would like to share with all trainees about one experience. For example, I primarily focus on reproduction, but not on development. And I was interviewed by Charles River for a study director position. And all the questions about development and developmental biology, I was like, I think I was failed due to that because I don't know the heart development or other kidney development pretty well. So if you want to go to industry and you may want to be well prepared. If you focus on development, you may want to like read some textbook about the ovary and other sperm testes too. For me, the case is I need to read more papers about the like developmental biology, so I can handle the question. Yeah, usually that is also the difference between academia and the industry. So we go very in depth about like I can study one signal pathway in one cell or in one organ for my whole lifelong time. But for industry, it's pretty different. You want to know other stuff. Yeah. So yeah, that's overall because I have pretty like a long history of the reproduction biology and toxicology background. So I focus on DART. And even though right now, I still focus on the ovary and the uterus and how environmental chemicals and clinical compound will affect women's reproduction. And what is your current position? Yeah, I'm assistant professor at Rutgers. And how did your school and training? Yeah, I think I already mentioned this. Actually, yeah, I went to University of Georgia for my PhD in toxicology, and then I went to Northwestern University for my postdoc training. And both of them, they can kind of give me a very comprehensive female reproductive biology and toxicology background. So right now I do the organ on chip and try to make the whole female reproductive system on a chip to do the like a novel research, including biology and toxicology. And how many years have you been in that position? So I moved to Rutgers about 2.5 years ago from University of South Carolina. So just because I know we have a lot of like, for example, Karen graduated from Rutgers University too, and we have a lot of like alumni or even current trainees from Rutgers. So Rutgers has one of the best toxicology program, and yeah, I think that's very great for trainees and actually also for professors. For example, for me, I'm exposed to all different disciplines of the toxicology. So I can do a very cutting edge and interdisciplinary and also transdisciplinary research. For example, I didn't know pharmacokinetics or toxicokinetics pretty well before, but right now we have like a Lauren Alexunos and other experts in this field, so I can introduce those concepts in my female reproductive toxicology research and to make it more translational, impactful, and also cutting edge. And yeah, for the last part, what's the most satisfying part of your job? I know, yeah, I was in a career session for the RDTSS at SOT a few weeks ago. Actually, we have two mentors in our table. Nobody asked me a question because I'm from academia, and most of the questions are going for industry, and that is reality. I don't blame them, to be honest. Like Dr. Minky said, like currently, or maybe since several years ago, we have some like a grand crisis for a lot of like trainees. They may see their mentor or other professors, they read proposal all the time and they are struggling on getting grant. Yeah, I would like to say that is not true. Like it's kind of, I spend a lot of time on writing grant too. I cannot say I enjoy this part, but I don't hate this part. So, but the most satisfying part is usually we go very in depth and I like the challenges. For example, whenever we want to study toxicology, we need to know why, and not only at the organ level, cellular level, but also the molecular level. I think that is the part I like the most. Yeah, and yeah, and also being a professor is, yeah, sometimes you cannot have freedom, but you also you don't have freedom. I work a lot after hour on weekend too, but sometimes if I want to take any day off, especially during the summer, yeah, usually, yeah, I'm totally independent. So my department chair doesn't matter, like she doesn't care. So usually, yeah, yeah, that's what my PhD mentor told me too. Like whenever you have kids, sometimes you get an emergency call from your school. Yeah, usually I can take off, but my wife is an elementary school teacher. It's really hard for her. So yeah, I'm happy to answer more questions, and also especially for some international trainees. And I have a similar background as you do, so I'm welcome. You are welcome to ask me any question about the career trajectory for being an international students too. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Shul. So I know we're getting close to our networking session, but I wanted to just see if there were any questions for our panelists from the audience. I know you'll have the opportunity to talk with some of them during the networking session, but if there are any burning questions that you'd like to ask now, you can either put them in the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself or raise your hand and ask the question. Otherwise, I have a few questions that I can ask that I think might be helpful to trainees here. And I think one of the burning questions that I know I get this question a lot, and this might be, the answer might be different whether you're in academia or industry, but one of the questions is, what are your thoughts on a postdoc? Is a postdoc necessary? What are the advantages or disadvantages of doing a traditional postdoc? And what are the other, I guess, opportunities for different types of postdocs? So I think that might be a good question for our audience here. If our panelists maybe could address one at a time. So do any of our panelists have a thought on the postdoc or doing a postdoc?
Well, I have an opinion, but it might be kind of dated by now.
That's okay, thanks, Sam.
Back when I had a choice of doing postdoc or going to industry, you know, the choice to me came down to, you know, do I want to start making money now, or do I want to be a starving postdoc for 3 or 4 years? And I'm not sure it really had much of an impact on my career. It possibly could have started maybe at a little higher salary. I don't know if it was started at a higher rank or anything, but at the time when I started positions, it was pretty much all on the job training. And so your background was almost irrelevant. As long as you had a science background and had some understanding of basic biology and physiology, you could be trained as a study director. And so from my perspective, a postdoc was not worth my time. At least that was my thoughts then.
Thanks, Dan. Barbara?
So I have an academic position and a mentor position on this. So this is a question that all of our PhD students ask themselves. And they all come up with different answers. So I don't think there's a right and a wrong path. What I can say is that they may choose one option, for example, move to industry. And then after a few years, they may want to go back to other things like academics. So it's easier. You have more choices if you do a postdoc before you choose. So that's the only advantage, I think. If you want an academic career, yes, you need a postdoc. If you're not totally sure that you're going down the right path and you just want to try it, sometimes it's good to do a postdoc first because it's much harder later. In fact, in some systems, it's really not easy to go back to do a postdoc. So you have to sort of make the choice up front, and it doesn't have to be a huge long postdoc, but you have to get something out of it that's distinct from what you did for your PhD.
Yeah, I think that's a key point there, Barbara, that if you're doing your postdoc in something that's different than what you did for your PhD, if you're going to do it to expand your skill set and to add to not just kind of extend the skill set that you already have, but to maybe branch out and do something that might, be of value to your career later on. So that's a good, I like that you pointed that out. I guess Cho or Danita, maybe from either your experiences or as your positions in hiring people or seeing people come in, do you have thoughts on either your postdoc and if that was helpful for your career, or if you see, people with and without postdocs coming in, is there a differentiation between someone with a postdoc and someone without a postdoc?
Yeah, I would say for my background, if you want to become a faculty, postdoc experience is definitely necessary because that is required in the post. And yeah, I based on my own experience, I think I don't regret I did a postdoc at all. I did my postdoc for like compared to other faculties, it's not that long. I got my faculty position in my second year postdoc, but at that time, my postdoc mentor told me you cannot go, like whether you can postpone because I just started not a very long time. So anyway, I did 3 years postdoc, and then I think it further enhanced my social skills, public speaking, leadership, and also other and my English too. So when I did my PhD, most of my lab mate we are from the same country. Sometimes we speak Chinese in the lab, and then for my postdoc lab, it's pretty diverse, and I specifically increase strengthen my English too. Right now I have a 5 postdoc in my lab. I sometimes they are, even though they plan to go to industry, but I still highly encourage them to practice their public speaking skills, leadership, and others to make them well prepared to go to industry. And I'm also totally fine if they want to go to industry, and as long as they want to make it clear, and I will train them based on their different career pathway. So if they want to go to industry, I will share those all the social network and other related information to them. If they want to go to stay in academia and become a professor, I will specifically train them on academic writing, proposal writing, and also the critical thinking on the research project.
So there was a question in the chat as well for you, Cho.
Oh yeah, so that's a very good question. So I think I forgot to mention this. The one of the most appealing part for staying in academia is I cannot say you have more options, but you have equal amount of the options. For example, I am collaborating with 2 industries, and one is we have the contract. It's kind of we help them define whether immunotherapy will affect the women's reproductive health. And that is pretty translational impactful. I can feel our expertise is pretty useful for the real world, and especially for those like a drug development biotech company or startup company. And also I have another foundation grant is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Even though it's not about a DART, it's about because we developed the organ on chip to study the reproductive toxicology. So the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they fund us. We didn't know them before. They want us to use our model to screen compound and develop the non-hormonal birth control pill. And that is also the first time I feel, it's good for being in academia, because you can also do the drug development from zero to the end too. So right now I'm learning all the process about the drug development activities. So I enjoy this part very, very well.
Thank you. So I'm just going to ask one more question, and I think it's probably pertinent to the whole discussion here, and it's going to be on the importance of networking. So what are your thoughts on networking, and what is your best tip on how to network most effectively for, I guess, for trainees to reach out to people like yourselves? And do you have any, I guess, tips or thoughts that you can give to our audience on networking?
Hi, Karen. I can start here.
Thanks, Anita.
Yeah, no problem. So networking has been very important to in my progression, my career progression. I was actually, I'm gonna say the truth and say forced to be a part of teratology and present at teratology at the time, and BDRP now. But it was a good thing for me, because I was able to meet some awesome people that have served as mentors, and still serve as mentors for me, some of which are on the call now, on the participating now. So it's so important to network. And what I will say is, um when people ask you to do things, lean into it. Even if you're nervous about it, you haven't done it before, you lean into those types of activities, because that's when you tend to grow your circle. You always want to have the opportunity to grow your circle, and you grow yourself by doing things like that. So you want to get your name out. You want to be able to be able to be known, be associated with a particular area. So you want to lean into uncomfortable type situations. And I think that's my advice on it.
That is great advice, and I would agree with that. Networking can be uncomfortable, especially when you're talking with people who are well respected in your field or have a lot of experience in your field. But I think it's important to remember that everybody started someplace, and so most people will appreciate where you're coming from and the networking that you're trying to do. Maybe from maybe response from our academic folks. Do you have thoughts on networking in the academic arena?
Maybe I can say that I'm very bad at it. So I think we network through scientific societies. I've networked tremendously through teratology, the Society of Toxicology, and the international toxicology groups that I've worked with. But I'm not a natural wet networker. So I agree that it's really an important skill. I think you can learn it, but it doesn't always come naturally.
Great. Elise, you have your hand up?
Yes, thanks, Karen. So again, being as shy as I am, and some will chuckle on the phone, but a lot of our scientific organizations offer opportunities for student trainees as they're coming to the meetings to be a part of their I guess networking events. And that's an opportunity for you to sit and do, say, speed networking. I mean, you know, you only have to really spend 10, 15 minutes talking to, you know, a professional, and then you move on to the next professional asking questions. Similar to something like this, but you get to tailor your focus and, you know, move from one station to the next and helping to build on your curiosity. But if you have the opportunity to go to scientific meetings to present your research, take the opportunity to join their student events so that you can hear more, but you can build a network even within your peers. Because sometimes when you get to meet peers that may have similar interests to you, you may be able to understand their path and their direction, and you become a little bit more curious about it. So if you are unsure whether, like, walking up to someone like Dr. Hales, who's great in the field, then maybe step back to someone who's still relatively new and have them introduce you to someone else, you know, kind of go in numbers and, you know, make sure that you can all kind of have a conversation that you can continue. Chatting by, you know, email, you know, certainly I'm available by email, and I'm sure any of my esteemed colleagues across the industry would be happy to set up some one-on-one time to, you know, talk to you by video chat or to talk to you before you go to scientific meetings, and while you know, set up time to have a coffee hour or just a quick lunch at a scientific meeting. So take advantage of everything that every scientific organization has for you, because they are built for those specific concerns to help integrate you into our society much more effectively.
Thanks, Elise. That's a great point. Any other thoughts on networking? I think.
Yeah, I'd just like to add in that, you know, don't be afraid to approach people at these scientific meetings. If you see someone that's, you know, presenting a poster or a talk from an industry or from academia or whatever they may be an interest in, you know, go up to them and introduce yourself and ask them about things. The repro world is relatively small compared to a lot of other disciplines. And we know that getting students into the reproductive side of things is not necessarily an easy proposition because we are so small and specialized. So we are usually more than willing to talk to anyone who comes up to us. As Barbara indicated, and although Elise says she's an introvert, I don't really believe it based on what I've seen today. A lot of us go into science because we are somewhat introverted anyway, but we're also not unwilling to talk to you about anything you may have a question on. So just, you know, approach us. I got nothing to lose by trying.
Yeah, Carrie, I would like to add one more short sentence. So for being like an international student, if English is not your first language, don't be afraid of talking to people too. And yeah, when I was a student, I forced myself to talk to other people. And right now I'm a faculty. I also try to talk to international students too. And for my international trainees in the lab, I always encourage them to talk to people during the reception, lab meeting, and other social activities. And yeah, especially going to the bar is really hard for us because the background, but it's just okay. You drink something, you drink your water, and then if they smell, you smell too. That's fine. You don't have to understand what they are talking about.
Thanks, that was a great perspective. Thanks for sharing. All right, I think I'm going to hand this over to Charmaine, and she's going to give us some information about our speed darting networking event.
I'd like to first, before we move on, to give a special thanks to our panelists. Thank you for sharing your journey and your stories and wisdom with our trainees. I think they really came away with a lot, and hopefully now they'll have some practice with networking. They'll have some practice with being uncomfortable or getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because now we're going to move into our speed darting session. Before we move on, I just want to kind of go through a few ground rules, or just give you some instructions. There will be 3 rounds of 15-minute sessions with our DART experts. You can ask questions, gain insights on your career goals. You can ask about their experiences or how one could transition into a career. You can ask about opportunities. You can ask about their own personal motivations, what their day-to-day looks like. Just a reminder, this networking session is intended to help trainees glean information for the career paths. It is not intended to get information directed towards specific scientific questions or current work-related questions. So please be kind and courteous to all of the attendees by adhering to these ground rules. So without further ado, I will separate you all into your breakout sessions. And I think Connie is here to lend a helping hand. Dear participants, your breakout sessions have begun. You will receive a 5-minute warning before you are moved to the next section.